The day Earth was humiliated. They didn't come with warships. They came with judgment. 1,000 alien vessels hung over Earth like silent gods, blotting out the sun in a perfect geometric arrogance. No sirens. No warning shots. Just a planetary broadcast forcibly hijacking every screen, every satellite, every backwater radio still clinging to life in forgotten valleys. And then came the voice. Cold. Smooth. Confident in a way only something certain of superiority could be. Species designation, Humanity of Sol 3. You are hereby placed under the Galactic Civic Review Council's Public Accountability Protocol. A pause. Not for effect. For contempt. You will now witness your verdict. On every screen across Earth, images began to roll. Wars. Droughts. Pollution. Corporate exploitation. Civil unrest. Every failure humanity had ever recorded, spliced, edited, exaggerated into a single continuous indictment. It was not truth. It was presentation. And it was devastatingly effective. In orbit, the alien armada watched as human governments scrambled. Missiles were launched, then disabled mid-flight like toys caught in invisible hands. Fighter jets rose, then dropped from the sky like stones. Entire defense grids went dark as if reality itself had been switched off. One by one, world leaders were forced onto the global feed. Pale. Furious. Powerless. Then the final blow came. The Galactic Council hereby revokes all pending trade accords, defensive treaties, and cultural integration agreements with humanity. Effective immediately. A new image appeared. Earth. Stamped across it in glowing red alien script. Non-compliant civilization, under review for containment. And then, silence. Not even the wind of orbiting ships disturbed the atmosphere. They thought it was over. That humanity would collapse under shame, political fracture, and intercontinental blame. That was their first mistake. In the underground command bunker beneath what used to be Geneva, laughter echoed. Not nervous laughter. Not panic. Amused laughter. General Marcus Hale, retired twice, reinstated 3 times, stared at the global feed with a half-empty coffee mug in one hand and a lit cigar in the other. Well, he said calmly, that's new. A young analyst beside him looked like he was about to vomit. Sir, they just revoked everything. We're cut off. Completely. Every alliance, every supply chain. Hale waved a hand. Yeah, I heard the dramatic narration. Non-compliant civilization. Sounds like my ex-wife's diary. No one laughed. He sighed. Let me guess. They think we're embarrassed. Yes, sir. And scared? Yes, sir. And politically unstable now? The analyst hesitated. That's the assessment, sir. Hale took a slow drag from his cigar. Then smiled. Good. That word didn't belong in the bunker. It made the room colder. Above them, the alien fleet began broadcasting again. A new message. This one slower. More ceremonial. You are encouraged to submit to guidance. Resistance is statistically irrational. Hale leaned forward. Patch me into the global counter channel. Sir? Do it. A technician hesitated. We don't have counter channel access anymore. They've locked. Hale tapped the table once. Just once. Try anyway. And somehow, it worked. The room went quiet as Earth's emergency broadcast system flickered back online. Not hijacked. Not overridden. Reactivated. The aliens paused. That was not supposed to happen. On the command ship axiom of judgment, the High Auditor narrowed his eyes. How did they restore bandwidth? A subordinate stammered. Impossible, sir. We severed quantum entanglement links. Their infrastructure should be primitive? The auditor finished. Yes, sir. A beat. Then the first crack in certainty appeared. Then explain it. No one could. On Earth, Hale adjusted the microphone. His face appeared across every screen now. Not edited. Not curated. Just a tired man in a military jacket that had seen too many wars. He looked up, as if speaking directly to the sky. "All right," he said casually. "You done?" The alien fleet paused again. This was not protocol. Humanity was supposed to break. To plead. To fracture into compliance. Not talk back. Hale continued. "You came all the way here to show us our highlight reel? Cute. Missed a few chapters, though." He leaned closer. "We noticed you skipped the part where we stopped being afraid of dying." A ripple passed through alien command channels. "Species is attempting psychological resistance," someone reported. Hale chuckled. "No, kid. This isn't psychology. This is courtesy." He tapped a console. And every alien ship suddenly received a file transfer request. Unencrypted. Open access. The High Auditor frowned. "What is this?" A technician opened it. His eyes widened. "Sir, it's military doctrine." Another voice. "No, it's war records. Thousands of them." Another. "They're giving us their classified history." The auditor's expression darkened. "Why would they?" The file opened fully. And the room went silent. Because it wasn't just war records. It was evolution. Every conflict. Every adaptation. Every time humanity had been pushed to extinction and refused to finalize the equation. Guerrilla wars in jungles that swallowed armies. Space skirmishes where losing fleets came back with upgraded tactics. Civil wars that birthed new doctrines in real time. And buried at the end of the file. A single annotation. "We stopped calling it survival when it got repetitive." On Earth, Hale smiled faintly. "You wanted to shame us," he said softly. "So we thought we'd return the favor." He gestured upward. "Now you know what we look like when we're bored." The alien fleet did not respond. For the first time since arrival, there was no immediate declaration. No judgment. Only hesitation. And somewhere in that silence, something like fear began to grow. Not of humanity's strength, but of its history. Because history implied experience. And experience implied repetition. And repetition implied one terrifying truth. Humans had done this before. And kept going. The High Auditor finally spoke. "Prepare a secondary assessment." His voice was lower now. Less certain. "Reevaluate species classification." A subordinate swallowed. "Sir, classification was already finalized." The auditor stared at Earth below. At the glowing blue sphere that did not look ashamed. It looked patient. "I said," he repeated quietly. "Reevaluate it." And on Earth, General Marcus Hale exhaled smoke and muttered to himself. "Good. Now we've got their attention." He crushed the cigar into the metal table. "And now," he said, "we find out if they're smart enough to leave." The first moment of doubt in gods. The alien armada did not retreat. But it also did not advance. That alone was unprecedented. In galactic doctrine, hesitation was a form of failure. Civilizations either dominated or were erased. There was no pause. No reconsideration. The universe did not reward uncertainty. Yet above Earth, uncertainty had begun to spread like a silent infection. On the axiom of judgment, command decks that had been pristine with certainty only hours ago were now cluttered with competing analyses, conflicting models, and something worse than panic. Disagreement. "Humans are attempting psychological escalation," one officer insisted. Another snapped back. "No, they're demonstrating historical survivability patterns." A third voice, quieter. "Those patterns indicate adaptive escalation under existential threat." The room went still. That phrase was not supposed to exist in relation to a Tier 6 primitive species. And yet, it did. On Earth, things were not calm either. But they were organized. That was what the aliens failed to understand first. Humans did not collapse under pressure. They restructured it. In the Geneva bunker, now operating as a global coordination hub, General Marcus Hale stood before a holographic map of Earth and orbit. Red markers showed alien fleet positions. Blue markers showed dormant systems being reactivated. "How many of our off-world assets are still blind?" he asked. A technician replied. 70%, sir. They jammed most civilian relay nets. But, we still have the black projects. Hale smiled faintly. Of course we do. Someone behind him whispered. Sir, those were never meant to be used. Hale turned slightly. Son, nothing we built was meant to be used. That's why we built it. A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the room. Then silence returned. Because outside Earth's atmosphere, the aliens had begun something new. Not invasion. Not bombardment. Observation. Thousands of microscopic probes detached from the armada, drifting down like ash. Each one designed to analyze, deconstruct, classify. They were meant to finish what the broadcast started. To reduce humanity from unknown threat to manageable data. But something went wrong. Not technically. Philosophically. The probes began returning inconsistent results. Human biology, stable, but unusually resilient to environmental stress variation. Human societies, unstable, but repeatedly reforming under collapse conditions. Human warfare, inefficient, but persistently innovative. Human emotional response, illogical, but highly coordinated in group stress scenarios. One analyst aboard the alien fleet finally said it out loud. They don't behave like a single species. The auditor turned sharply. Explain. The analyst hesitated. Sir, they behave like multiple civilizations sharing one timeline. That statement should have been dismissed immediately. Instead, it was replayed. And replayed again. Because it fit too well. On Earth, Hale received a secure transmission. A decrypted alien signal fragment, intercepted and translated. It was not a threat. It was a question. Why do you persist after systemic failure cycles? Hale read it twice. Then laughed. Not loudly. Not mockingly. Just, tiredly amused. He leaned toward the microphone. Because we don't call them failures, he said. We call them Tuesdays. There was a pause on the alien end of the transmission. Then another message arrived. Faster this time. Clarify. Hale leaned back. Oh, you're not gonna like this part. In orbit, the High Auditor finally convened a full council subchannel. Representatives from 6 core fleets appeared as floating holographic presences, each one adorned in symbols of authority, conquest, and genetic purity. The auditor spoke first. We have made a procedural error in classification. Immediate outrage. That is impossible. Humans were pre-evaluated across 17 cycles. Their civilization is primitive. The auditor raised a hand. And for the first time since arrival. He hesitated. Then said it anyway. They are not primitive. Silence. That word carried weight. Because not primitive implied uncatalogued. And uncatalogued things in the galaxy were rarely harmless. They are adaptive, he continued, across scales that violate statistical survivability norms. A council member scoffed. Adaptation is expected. All species adapt. The auditor's voice hardened slightly. Not like this. He projected new data. Entire human wars compressed into behavioral graphs. Economic collapses followed by technological spikes. Cultural breakdowns immediately replaced by unified global cooperation under external threat. A pattern emerged. Not random. Not chaotic. Reactive coherence. One council member leaned forward. They unify when pressured. Yes, the auditor said quietly. Another voice. That is not unique. The auditor enlarged the projection. And they fracture when not. That changed the room. Because that was not evolution. That was instability as a feature. A civilization that required external pressure to remain coherent. A species that became stronger when threatened. And unstable when ignored. One council member whispered. That is not a weakness. the auditor replied. No. A pause. It is a trigger mechanism. On Earth, Hale stood alone in a dim command corridor, watching the alien fleet through a live orbital feed. You're starting to get it, he murmured. Behind him, a younger officer spoke carefully. Sir, if they understand our pattern, won't they just avoid triggering it? Hale shook his head. No. He turned slightly. That's the funny part. He gestured at the sky. They already did. The officer frowned. Then why are they still here? Hale smiled. Because now they're wondering what happens if they push harder. A silence followed. Then the officer asked the question everyone was afraid to voice. Sir, what does happen? Hale looked up at the burning sky of orbiting ships. And for the first time, his expression wasn't amused. It was honest. We don't know. A pause. Then softer. But history says we find out together. Above Earth, the alien fleet shifted formation for the first time since arrival. Not an attack posture. Not a withdrawal. A containment lattice. The Council had made a decision. Not destruction. Not diplomacy. Controlled escalation testing. The High Auditor spoke quietly into the command channel. We will apply limited pressure. A council member hesitated. And if they escalate? The Auditor watched Earth. Then we learn the limit. And on Earth, every military channel lit up red. Because humanity had just received a new classification from orbit. Species under progressive stimulus observation. General Marcus Hale read it once. Then crushed the terminal with his fist. Well, he said calmly, flexing his hand, that's a fancy way of saying poke it and see what screams. He turned to his staff. Gentlemen, they didn't come to judge us. A pause. They came to experiment on us. He smiled faintly. Bad news for them. He leaned forward. We're excellent test subjects. And far above, the first alien, Stimulus Pulse, was armed. Not a weapon. Not yet. Just a pressure wave designed to stress planetary systems. To observe collapse. To measure reaction. The Auditor gave the order. Begin Phase 1. And Earth's skies lit up. Not with destruction. But with something far more dangerous. Attention. When the world stopped pretending to be small, the first stimulus pulse didn't explode. It pressed. Like an invisible ocean dropping onto Earth's atmosphere, compressing satellites, distorting electromagnetic grids, and forcing every power system on the planet to flicker under strain. It was not meant to destroy. It was meant to test endurance. In orbit, the alien fleet watched carefully. This was the moment their entire classification system depended on. The moment humanity either proved itself a manageable anomaly, or revealed itself as something worse. A controlled collapse curve was expected. A gradual breakdown of infrastructure. Then panic. Then fragmentation. Then compliance. That was the model. That was always the model. On Earth, alarms screamed across continents. But what followed was not panic. It was coordination. And that confused them immediately. General Marcus Hale stood at the center of the Geneva Command Hub as reports flooded in. Power grid stabilizing in real-time reroute. Satellite clusters are compensating manually. No AI override, human input confirmed. Military and civilian comms are merging into unified emergency mesh. A junior officer whispered. Sir, they're adapting to the pressure wave. Hale didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. Of course they are. He leaned forward. We built systems for collapse. Why are you shocked they collapse correctly? The officer blinked. Sir? Hale pointed at the orbital feed. Because we never built anything that assumes we won't survive. Above Earth, the High Auditor narrowed his eyes. Explain the stabilization. A technician's voice trembled. Sir, they are counter-distributing load across redundant infrastructure nodes. Another added. They're intentionally sacrificing non-critical systems to preserve planetary core functionality. A pause. Then the worst realization yet. They are choosing what to lose. Silence. That was not collapse behavior. That was strategic triage under planetary scale pressure. One council member leaned forward. That is impossible for a species without centralized hive command. Another responded, quieter now. Unless they are not centralized. The auditor spoke slowly. Or unless decentralization is their command structure. That idea hung in the air like a blade. Because decentralized command systems did not fracture under pressure. They multiplied it. The second pulse came faster. Stronger. This time it targeted communication integrity. The goal: isolate regions. Break global coordination. Force local panic pockets. Instead, something unexpected happened. The aliens watched as Earth's communication networks rerouted through failures. Cities that lost contact became relay points. Emergency civilian systems were repurposed into tactical coordination hubs. Even outdated amateur radio networks suddenly became critical infrastructure nodes. And then, something even worse. Humans started improvising new protocols in real time. Not pre-written. Not planned. Emerged. The auditor finally spoke aloud what no one wanted to say. They are treating collapse as input. A subordinate replied. Sir, that is not survivable behavior. The auditor didn't answer immediately. Because the data disagreed. On Earth, Hale stood with arms crossed as the second pulse rolled over the planet like a storm made of physics itself. Behind him, someone muttered, We're losing stability in southeast grid clusters. Another voice responded instantly. Reroute through Arctic relay mesh. A third. Already done. No hesitation. No panic. Just adjustment. Hale spoke quietly, almost to himself. They think they're squeezing us. A pause. He exhaled smoke from a fresh cigar. But they don't realize something. He tapped the screen. We've been under pressure since before they built ships. Then came the mistake. The aliens escalated again. The third pulse was not environmental. It was psychological. A signal broadcast across all neuroactive species on Earth. A synthetic resonance designed to induce fear response loops, disorientation, and social breakdown. On paper, it was flawless. Across galactic history, it had broken dozens of emerging civilizations. On Earth, it lasted 4 seconds, then stopped working. Not blocked. Not resisted. Overwritten. Because humanity had already built systems for psychological warfare that didn't rely on suppression. They relied on desensitization training at population scale. Every war. Every crisis. Every generation raised on chaos as background noise. The signal hit Earth like a weapon striking a wall that had already learned how to bend. And bent back. The alien fleet registered something terrifying. The expected fear spike never peaked. Instead, it flattened. Then dispersed. One analyst whispered, They are habituated. Another corrected, No, they are pre-habituated. The auditor's voice dropped. Meaning? A long pause. Then the answer came. They have already experienced worse. On Earth, something changed. Not technologically. Culturally. Hale noticed it first. The global coordination network stopped reacting defensively. Instead, it started organizing offensively. Not toward the aliens. Toward options. We're not just stabilizing anymore, a technician said. We're mapping counterpressure nodes in orbit. Hale frowned. Who authorized that? Silence. Then a nervous voice. No one, sir. Another added quickly. It emerged from civilian engineering clusters. Hale slowly turned. You're telling me the planet is improvising a counterattack without permission? A pause. Then, Yes, sir. Hale smiled faintly. There it is. Above Earth, the High Auditor received the first true anomaly report. Sir, they are beginning to simulate orbital interference strategies. A council member snapped. Impossible. They have no fleet. The technician hesitated. They are building one. Silence. Then correction. No, sir, they are designing one using distributed fabrication models. Another voice. That would take decades. The technician's voice lowered. They are compressing it. The auditor finally looked unsettled. Compressing? Yes, sir. A pause. Using synchronized industrial repurposing across planetary scale. Another report came in immediately after. They are converting non-critical infrastructure into orbital launch components. A third followed. Sir, they are not panicking under stimulus anymore. The auditor leaned forward slightly. What are they doing? The answer came slowly. Planning response. Escalation. A long silence followed. Then the auditor said the words no one wanted to hear. From a species that was supposed to break. On Earth, Hale received a final message from orbit. Not a broadcast. Not a demand. A question. Why are you resisting observation? He read it once. Then laughed softly. Resisting? He leaned toward the transmission node. We thought this was a conversation. A pause. Then his expression hardened. But since you're taking notes. He tapped the console. We're going to start writing louder. Above Earth, the alien fleet shifted again. Not confident. Not certain. For the first time since arrival. Careful. Because something had changed in the equation. Humanity was no longer reacting to pressure. It was beginning to answer it. And answers could be more dangerous than defiance. The auditor finally issued a new directive. Prepare containment escalation protocols. A subordinate hesitated. Sir, containment implies we can still control the outcome. The auditor stared at Earth. That is what we are about to test. And below, humanity finished its first silent consensus. Not war. Not peace. Something older. Something simpler. Response. When Earth stopped asking permission, the final escalation didn't arrive like the others. There was no pulse. No broadcast. No ceremonial warning from orbit. Just silence. And then gravity itself shifted, subtly at first, like the universe had briefly forgotten which direction, down, was supposed to be. Every system in orbit registered the same anomaly. Earth was emitting structured gravitational interference patterns. Not naturally. Not accidentally. Engineered. On the axiom of judgment, alarms finally stopped being theoretical. Massive distributed energy alignment detected. Planetary scale synchronization event underway. Impossible. No known civilization reaches this level of coordination without centralized command. The High Auditor stood motionless. For the first time since arrival, he did not issue an immediate correction. Because there was nothing left to correct. The model had broken. On Earth, General Marcus Hale watched the live orbital feed as something enormous began to form above the planet. Not a weapon. Not yet. A shape. A system. A response architecture built out of everything humanity had ever discarded: old satellite frames, decommissioned orbital stations, asteroid mining rigs, civilian launch systems, abandoned research platforms, and thousands of emergency infrastructure modules quietly repurposed during the previous stimulus waves. It wasn't a fleet. Not in the alien sense. It was worse. It was assembled intent. A voice behind Hale whispered, "Sir, it's not supposed to be possible." Hale didn't look away from the sky. Neither were we. The Alien Council finally fractured. This is escalation beyond observation protocol. They are constructing an orbital counterstructure. We must terminate stimulus immediately. But the auditor raised a hand. No. Silence fell. Even dissent paused. He stared at Earth, where something vast and patient was now rising into orbit like a mechanical horizon. We continue. A council member snapped. Continue? They are building a defense lattice in real time. The auditor's voice was quieter now. Then we learn what they defend against. That sentence should have sounded clinical. It didn't. It sounded uncertain. On Earth, Hale finally spoke into the open global channel. Not to governments. Not to militaries. Not even to humanity. To orbit. All right, he said calmly. A pause. You've been pressing us for 3 days. He gestured upward. And we've been adjusting. Another pause. But you made a mistake. Static answered him. Then a reply came from orbit. Clarify. Hale smiled faintly. You assume pressure reveals weakness. He leaned closer to the microphone. It doesn't. A beat. It reveals structure. Then Earth answered. Not with words. With action. The orbital lattice completed synchronization. And for the first time, the aliens saw it fully. A planetary defense system that had not been built in peace. Not in war. But in anticipation of both. A system designed not to win battles, but to ensure that every battle became unsustainable for the attacker. The first counterwave launched. Not a missile. A rewrite of orbital space-time stress distribution. Alien ships experienced something they had never encountered. Localized physics instability around fleet formations. Their formations began to drift, not due to damage, but due to loss of predictable spatial anchoring. The High Auditor finally spoke, voice tight. They are altering orbital constants. A subordinate whispered. Sir, that violates. Yes, the Auditor interrupted. Everything. On Earth, Hale exhaled slowly. No, he said, almost conversationally. You understand the problem. He tapped the console. You tried to test us with pressure. A pause. But pressure doesn't work when the subject learns to distribute it. Above Earth, alien ships began recalibrating emergency stabilization fields. Too late. Human systems had already begun responding to response prediction patterns. Every alien adjustment was mirrored, countered, and redistributed across Earth's lattice faster than centralized command could process. One council member finally said it aloud. They are out-adapting our adaptation. The Auditor didn't deny it. Because the data agreed. Then came the final transmission from Earth. Not Hale. Not command. Not military. A global open broadcast. Every language at once. Every channel synchronized. It said only this. You came to judge us. A pause. You came to test us. Another pause. But you never asked the question that mattered. Silence stretched across orbit. Even the fleet's internal chatter slowed. Then the message continued. Do you know what happens when something refuses to stay within your categories? On the axiom of judgment, no one answered. Because they already knew the answer was dangerous. Earth concluded. It stops being observable. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, a classification system failed not because it lacked data, but because the subject refused to remain measurable. The High Auditor finally gave the order. End observation protocol. A council member exhaled in relief. But the Auditor continued. Not because they failed. A pause. Because we did. Silence. Then he said the words that would later be recorded in the council archives as the beginning of the reclassification era. We did not find a primitive species. We found a species that treats survival as infrastructure. And conflict as weather. Above Earth, the alien fleet began to withdraw. Not in defeat. In recalculation. Careful. Measuring. Uncertain. And below them, humanity did not celebrate. Did not cheer. Did not even fully relax. Because for the first time in history, they had been seen correctly. And that meant the universe would come back with better questions. General Marcus Hale watched the retreating fleet until it disappeared into orbit shadow. Then he muttered, almost to himself. Well? He crushed the cigar in his palm. Next time, maybe they'll ask first. Behind him, Earth's new orbital lattice dimmed slightly. Not powering down. Just waiting. Because humanity had learned something simple. Something ancient. Something dangerous. If the universe insists on measuring you, you eventually learn how to change the ruler. End.